Can you hear me now?
Well, welcome along to the People Mechanics podcast. I'm John Peachey, Chief People Mechanic here at the Think Farm. You know, what I always say and I always believe is that we will be smarter than me. I might know a thing or two, but the people who listen, the people who participate know a heck of a lot more about the subject than I do. And collectively, we're looking at finding some wisdom that's going to help leaders in 2024. Shanthan Naidu is the principal of Orakei School in central Auckland. Whether you sit at a Decile 1 or a Decile 10 level, school principalship is demanding in this day and age. And it's good to wrangle some questions, to wrestle with some topics which really affect leadership in the education sector. Shanthan Naidu, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, John.
Hey man, good to have you here. I'm intrigued. You're a new, what I would describe as a new breed of principal. Right, so you're relatively new in the hot seat.
Yes, this is my second year in the role at Orakei.
Fantastic. I've always wanted to ask this question of a new principal. On day one, the first day of your principalship in a new school, you get to the end of the day, everyone's gone home, you're sitting there in your principal's office. What goes through your mind?
You're quite excited that you've completed your first day and you got to the end of it. And then you're in a position of what now? How do I get through my to-do list? Because of the magnitude of the job ahead of you, from finance to property to curriculum to people management, working and forming relationships with your community and board, you're just inundated with information overload.
Yeah, I can imagine. Was there this kind of I won't say crushing feeling,
Yeah.
but I've often talked to deputy principals who have acted in a role of senior leader. There's a vast difference, isn't there? The weight on your shoulders when you are the guy or the girl in charge, as opposed to being someone who's acting the role, right? Did you feel that weight on you?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought I was, more than ready for it, and you felt ready, and mentally you were like really pushing yourself for the position of principalship from a deputy principal role. But I don't think you have the understanding, I think, in the role at times of the expectation and the demands of the principal job when the buck stops with you. You making that phone call or you making the last call. So it was things like that you had to get used to. And you felt the pressure because people were reliant on you and your decision-making skills at that time. And as a DP, you quite have the luxury of sort of offloading or sharing that responsibility with your principal and letting them make the last call. And now the sort of tables have turned, so to speak, and you're in the position now to make that call, and you sort of have to have a bit of an awareness and confidence to make those decisions. So you learn pretty quickly. Although you feel like you've got there, you haven't. It's actually the start of a new journey, a new learning journey as a leader.
Well, let me ask you then, what has changed, do you think, in self-reflection from being a deputy principal, and you've had a number of roles where you've been supporting senior leaders.
Yes.
What do you think's had to change in your leadership to take the senior role?
I think it's more the big picture and having more accountability to that and strategic thinking and resourcing around that. Whereas in the deputy principal role, you have your portfolio. You could be looking after behavior. You could be looking after relievers. You could have an area of the curriculum you look after. But as I said, that's just one portion or one part of the big picture. Whereas the strategic plan comes through, you as the principal have to action that with your leadership team. So it's not, it's having an awareness of how that works, not just in the first 4 weeks, but the next 2 years. And then forecasting your staffing, your budgets, your resourcing, your constraints, your challenges, and still moving people forward towards that vision, I think is a big part of it. It's also arming yourself with good research that backs up your thinking and your actions as a leader. You can't just go in blind and expect things to happen. You've got to give people the why and how you sort of not convince them, but give them a good idea of what the why looks like for the organization moving forward. And I thought that's a big part of it as well, which was a shift in my thinking. Yeah.
I'm intrigued. You're alluding to strategic activities as a principal, and not just in principalship, but across a lot of industries, leaders that I talk to really struggle to get to the strategic space. Is that they're so busy dealing with stuff that the strategic thing becomes further and further out of their reach because of there's so much going on. But it sounds like the strategic thing you're talking about a couple of years out, so that's thinking well down the track.
Yeah.
Find you get enough time to do that.
When you can, I think it has to be at the forefront of your planning when you're moving forward. So you get people buying into your thinking, saying that if this is the annual plan, this is how we're going to move forward as a team, and this is how we're going to review it. So it becomes more an evaluation tool against your beliefs and your direction. So in terms of the leadership space, you become more of an evaluative leader, and also at the same time developing evaluative capabilities within your team. And that takes a specific skill again, because there's certain certain characteristics you need as a high performing functioning team to do proper evaluation and then inform your decision making as you move forward. And I think that's a big part of it, because our board of trustees do expect us to provide adequate data and have enough of a reason as to why we're doing what we're doing before we commit to it. So there's that sort of juggle that's going on between meetings and between sort of data entry points or transition points, as well as communicating that out to just not your staff, but as I said, the wider group, which is your stakeholders, your board, your community, and so on. So yeah, that's very much part of the role, I think, moving forward for myself.
So in terms of challenges, and I think you've touched
Yeah.
on something there about communication. I mean, getting that information out. It's one thing to have the strategic plan, to understand where you're going, but it's a completely different story to be able to make sure that everybody is on board with that. The communication is good. Is communication one of the biggest challenges that you would face as a senior leader?
Yeah, I think you just got to have clarity and purpose behind your communication. You have to be very concise in the message you're trying to convey. Say it once, and say it well. But there's work that has to be done, because we all have different communication styles coming together as a team. And then you have debates on how often should we communicate, because we're in a culture where we tend to over communicate with all the social media channels available to us. The information coming in through Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, whatever you might choose. So what is the best way to communicate to our community? What are the best ways to communicate with each other and the staff? It has to be done through a brainstorm and a process of talking. So one of the big things we're doing this year is working on the 4 C's, which is communication, collaboration, connection, and celebration. So that's a school-wide sort of goal with the leadership team and staff. And that's what we work to in our weekly sort of conversations and our school culture.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because that gives you a pretty straightforward framework to tie things back to, doesn't it? Do the values of the resources, does the attention come back to the 4 C's? I think that's pretty darn good, actually.
Yeah, it's helped, John, because like last year, as I said, being a new principal and you're going, now what? I'm sitting at the table. And then one of the things we picked up on was, our communication could be more effective, and our connection with each other also, because we're new staff, new school leader. So what are the expectations for the new year? So if we, concisely package that up into 4 C's and then look at how that looks like for the organization as a group, then it gives us a bit of a direction, and also ways to review how we're performing. So that's taken a big part of the first term and this term to work on our teach only day as well.
No, I think that's fantastic. I was going to say to you, there's a protocol which I teach leaders, which has made me very unpopular, which is what I call scissor theory. And that is, if the social media channels, if the communication pathways are not serving the outcomes of the school, cut the damn things off. It's kind of it's there's so much confusion out there, right? And unfortunately, never before has our community and all, I'll call them stakeholders, that's a loose term, I think, but
Yeah.
of all stakeholders been able to input into your space, right? They can invade you 24 hours a day. I've spoken to teachers that have had emails from parents at 11 o'clock at night. Just unacceptable behavior, I think, and not helpful. But as I say, if the communication channels are not aiding the outcomes, then man, you've got to really take an axe to them, I think, or scissors, as I describe them.
I like that theory.
Yeah. Not that popular, I have to say, so with some of the younger people. But I just think sometimes we get bombarded by stuff that actually we really can't do anything about. And if you can't do anything about it, there's not a lot of point in feeding yourself on it, I think. I think as a senior leader, your time is taken up by all sorts of things. And that kind of leads me to the next question, kind of a two-part question. I'll be a bit mean to you. Is like, where do you have to spend the most time in the school at the moment? Where is your time directed to mostly?
Yeah, interesting question that, because it's divided. From my end, it's a lot of administration and compliance that I need to attend to, in terms of ensuring that school's a safe place for students and teachers and community to be in. There's a lot of time spent on property, our five-way and budget sort of constraints in that area. Also spending time working through our school finance to ensure there's adequate sort of financial resourcing for the programs we'd like to have administered at school, staff we'd like to employ. So again, it gives me time to strategically think, but it does take up a big portion of my day because the conversations revolve around that. It gives me a small amount of time to actually visit classes, engage with kids, with teachers, but I do try and make that a priority as well as part of my week. So I think time management is important for preservation. And to touch back, John, on your last point about emails coming in and so on, it's also the well-being aspect of the job that we need to look at as leaders, and looking after those in our charge. And emails as well as meeting schedules and expectations for reporting and planning have to be measured and done in collaboration, because you can lose your staff and your team if they are finding it quite stressful at work.
Oh, absolutely. I often say to people, we can reach $100 million goal in sales, but if half our staff are divorced, the other half are alcoholics, then it's a net zero gain, right? I mean, it's a bad
That's
situation.
right.
I always take delight in telling teams, Samuel Parnell fought in this country for the 40-hour working week. Well, if I asked a principal whether they work 40 hours and go home, of course, they'd probably laugh me out the back door. But you've got to look after yourself, haven't you? And my question to you is, how do you stay sane in the seat? What do you do to make sure you maintain sanity? You're married to another principal. So
Yes.
so you guys have got a double-edged sword there going on. How do you keep each other sane and on an even keel?
I guess it helps knowing what the job entails. And there's that whole sort of conversation around, how do we support each other in that space? But it's also time management. As I said before, like at the start of the week, you map out your meetings, you map out your important thinking time, you map out your times you get to spend with your community and your school. So that helps provide a framework for the week ahead. I think it's critical to just communicate to yourself, have I got these boxes ticked for the week coming up? And if you feel reassured about that, it's going to be a good weekend. Look, you can't predict the surprise email at midnight, 11 a.m. or 4 a.m. It's going to happen. And I think you just got to expect that as part of the role. But it's how you manage that when you do get those emails or you get those sort of complaints, whatever it might be. Hopefully they're positive ones as well. But I think there's that whole idea of just managing yourself through week by week and having what you call a situational awareness of where you are mentally, physically, and how you're feeling as well. So it doesn't have to be mapped out, but if you're feeling a bit like you're lagging, maybe you take an afternoon off and you do something completely different and away from the job. Or if you're feeling great and you do your best work in the morning, I think that's when you have those meetings and those difficult meetings or strategic meetings, if you call them that. And that works better for you. So yeah, and you have to have an opportunity at home to vent. And I guess venting to another principal helps because they understand your context and know where you're coming from and can just listen.
That's right. And every now
Yeah.
and again tell you to harden up. I know, I understand.
Yeah. I get that
No,
as
I mean,
well.
it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you're in the people business, as I always say.
Yeah.
If we're senior leaders, we're in the people business. And if we're in the people business, we're in the business of emotions. And that can be some of the most difficult things. I mean, you can look after your physical, your physical being. You can make sure that your body is healthy. You can look after your intellectual well-being by studying, by listening to podcasts, by engaging in great conversations. But often the thing which takes leaders out is the emotional toll. And whether you're at a school of 300 or a school of 3,000, some of the principals I talk to, Patrick Drum, 3,800 kids at Mount Albert Grammar. That is a huge community. That is a lot of emotion, right? That's a lot of stuff going on. So we have to be aware of it. And You know, Shanthan, one of my key statements in leadership is that when leaders rise, everyone rises. And that we, as senior leaders, we have to be well, right? We have to be well to guide the ship, to run the team. And so I'm glad that you've got some strategies. And yeah, I'm sure your wife doesn't tell you to harden up. I'm sure that's not true, but it's good to have someone who understands, right? Someone who really understands.
Yeah.
You know, I
Yeah,
mean, I often talk
absolutely.
about resilience as being a soft place to fall. Having people who understand what's going on for you, and I think that's fantastic. Hey, mate, I wanted to ask you a question, and it might sound a bit egotistical, but research shows that the greatest leaders on the planet focus on a single thing, often focus on a very, very narrow thing, and they master that thing and be exceptional at it. And I spoke to Roger Gray, the CEO of the Port of Auckland recently, and he just said, I major on getting stuff done, right? Actual execution, which is, can't overlook that, right? That's absolutely fantastic. So I didn't prep you for this question, but I mean,
Yeah.
so what is Shanthan really, really good at?
I guess prioritizing and ensuring that the priority is aligned with what I'm currently doing. And so my time, energy, and resources invested in that. I find that if it's not in alignment with what I'm doing, then it's a waste of time. And that sort of provides reassurance for my team, the school, and for myself as well. So it's quite affirming when you have a priority or task that's fairly challenging, and you get on the other side knowing that the strategy worked, or the systems in place for the priority to be achieved worked as well. So it's affirming, and it sort of gives you that confidence to move into the next thing or bigger challenge. And I think that's really helped me get through the multitude of timeframes and expectations that were placed or that are placed on principals or in the role. So yeah, that was something I think would be quite useful in terms of my what you call it, my leadership sort of yeah.
No, good, mate. No, well, and I want to leave you with one last question,
Yeah.
because I think there's a lot of negative, there's a lot of negative talk around education in terms of performance and outcomes, and the stress on teachers, and certainly the stress on senior leaders, and this public view that teachers have an easy ride. I mean, I don't know a teacher ever who has an easy ride, and so that really concerns me, and I'm trying to straighten out some of that conversation about the number of hours that teachers work and the difficulty they face. However, what are you most excited about at Orakei School at the moment? What really floats your boat about what's going on at school?
Oh, I think it's just the opportunity for change, the mission to sort of make a difference to the learners we have in our space. There's room to grow and explore different avenues of learning, resourcing, initiatives that are coming through. So I think that sort of keeps me motivated, knowing we've got a new team and they also want to give their best in terms of, adding value to what we've started. So for me, I think it's the freshness of the role and the opportunity it presents itself to develop the school into something special. That's something at the back of my mind, and hence I took on the role 2 years or a year and a half ago now. And that was one of my main motivations, to make a positive difference in the lives of our learners and the community I'm working for.
Mate, that's fantastic. Shanthan Naidu is the principal of Orakei School in Auckland, and 18 months into it. And mate, it's fabulous to hear your energy and enthusiasm and the skill set. I mean, it is, you can't underestimate the breadth of the skill set which is required in this modern age to lead a school. And it sounds like you're doing a great job, mate. I really appreciate your comments.
No, thank you, John. Appreciate the talk.
Nice to see you, and we'll talk to you again in another 18 months.
Yeah, okay, sure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.